I used to assist in the weekly garbage pail maintenance, like taking out the trash and stuff when I was a kid. This was like part of my weekly chores. And so this was during a period of time when I lived with my grandparents. My grandfather, who um, was also in charge of like the outdoor parts of garbage, um, the ones, the ones that you put by the side of the road. That was his kind of department. So these particular outdoor garbage pails, we kept them in an area in the backyard that was kind of out of plain sight, um, which made it very attractive and popular for the raccoons to try and tip over the lids and then get into the garbage. And then, of course, do what raccoons do with garbage, which is make a huge mess. So this kept happening, and some time went by where my grandfather tried to tie the lids down, and he tried several different ways of tying it. And every time the raccoons would successfully get in there. So finally, he figured out a knot to keep the lid shut. It was like, it's hard to explain. It was kind of like one set of twine was like around the two trash cans, and then I can't remember how he did it, but he somehow figured out a way to do it. But unfortunately, it depended on the rest of the people in the household, like remembering to make sure the lids were shut and to not disturb the knot that he had made, the rope twine contraption, which wasn't complex. It just required a little bit of attention. You couldn't just randomly go up to the garbage and just sort of shut it. You had to make sure it was like completely shut. And I was a kid when this happened, so I remember the way he looked at this problem it was kind of like a battle between him and the raccoons, which was, on the one hand, I knew he was getting frustrated with it, but on the other hand, it was kind of amusing too. But what I appreciate about him, especially now, is that his first reaction was not to want to poison the raccoons, which he easily could have done. And as a side note, before I come back to that, when I actually was remembering this memory to record for this podcast, what happened shortly after that was I was checking my email, and this just happened this week. I went into my email account and I saw from one of the many environmental organizations, I think it was Center for Biological Diversity, that they had some news about a mountain lion, I think in California, that got killed. It got run over, so they were basically appealing to people to say, let's try not to do that, and also development was really part of the problem for that as well. But so that was their goal in talking about it. But they also talked about the fact that when the mountain lion got run over, they figured out, or I don't know if they did some kind of autopsy or something, but it was a pregnant mountain lion, and they had found out that the real cause of death before, was that they had poison ingested in the system, as well as the young, the pregnant lion's babies had poison in them. And, it was obviously heartbreaking, but also I thought it was interesting that I had just read this email maybe 24 hours after I had remembered this memory from, childhood, about how easy it could have been for my grandfather to just poison the raccoons, which obviously seems to be something that people are doing to mountain lions out in California or various other places. And before I get back to what I was originally going to say about my grandfather and this raccoon incident, I would like to point out that this kind of like mentality that some people have, which is, you're not being confronted with a mountain lion on your back door and you're not in danger of being mauled by a mountain lion. So there is no that happens, okay? But in this instance, I'm sure that wasn't happening. I'm sure the person who poisoned this mountain lion wasn't like, you know, at risk of being killed by the mountain lion, okay? Because they wouldn't have had time to poison the mountain lion. I don't mean to laugh about that, but it's true. So our knee-jerk, this person's knee-jerk reaction was to proactively poison this animal for whatever reason. I'm sure it was a nuisance in some way. It's kind of odd that it was a mountain lion and not, let's say, you know, maybe it just makes you wonder about the kinds of people that are doing this. And I'm not saying this as an animal rights activist so much as I'm talking about the bigger picture of this. The immediate knee-jerk reaction that some people, thankfully not all, but some people have to kill, kill, kill is actually not helpful in a survival mode, because you're not doing it in a survival mode. You're doing it as a kind of preemptive strike against the animal kingdom. And what's not healthy about this is we need to be doing the exact opposite of this on a collective level. I mean, we need to be thinking and not just in our mental bodies, but in our spiritual bodies, which is what I've been trying to talk about a little bit in this animal spirit context. We need to be thinking and feeling and trying to tap into consciousnesses, or I should say a type of consciousness, which I've been trying to get at with these episodes, that allows us to interact with animal spirits, or an animal spirit. So let's say if you're out in California and you know there are mountain lions out there, maybe that's a particular spirit that you might be drawn to. You don't have to physically be near an actual mountain lion, but you could maybe, you know, start to kind of introduce the idea of having some kind of communication or relationship or rapport, let's say, on a spiritual consciousness level. I haven't really gotten into like the different steps you could take to do that, because that's something we might talk about in the class, because that I've been talking to you guys about. But I just wanted to bring this news story up because it's probably not something you may have heard about, because I got it through an email. And, you know, I know this kind of thing happens a lot. And accidents happen where, you know, animals get run over, and that's understandable. But we're also seeing things that are happening that we could do something about. Maybe not everybody, but some people. For example, development. Development doesn't seem like it would be a killer of not just animals, but, you know, trees, plant life, but it kind of is. It's just as bad, in my opinion, or as damaging as, especially new development, like, you know, new construction, that doesn't need to be done. You know, if something is an old dilapidated building and it needs to be torn down, I can kind of understand that. But most of the time that's not the case. And what happens is then other natural versions of life, plant life, trees, animals, the places where animals hang out, they don't have anywhere to go anymore. So then they start coming into suburban areas, and then something like this happens with the mountain lion. I'm guessing this is what happened. You know, you're hearing stories about bears kind of coming into areas that they don't normally come into. Or at least I see that occasionally. You know, I'm not, without fact checking it, I'm not sure. But some of this is happening because of development. And, you know, we could put our reins on that. It's not easy because you're going up against major corporations when you do that. And I'm not doing this podcast to kind of be on a crusade for that, but it is one of the side benefits of why I'm talking about consciousness, and you can hear it in what I'm trying to say because it's affected my life. You know, once you develop a consciousness and a rapport with the spiritual essence of something, aka a plant or a tree, or in this case we've been talking about animal spirits, it's very hard to go back to being the way you were before that. I suppose it's possible, but you kind of don't want to go back to the way you were before that, which was kind of maybe unaware, for better or worse. And so you want things to be better. You want people to have the same kind of experiences that you do on a consciousness level. They might be really personal, and they are very personal. So I'm glad I kind of got off on a little bit of a very related tangent. But getting back to, I'd like to come back to the raccoon story and about my grandfather and the garbage cans and that kind of conflict where he was trying to basically outsmart the raccoons. So many years have passed, and now when I connect with the ancestors, and I should say in a spiritual way, sometimes the spirit of a bear is present. And in waking life, in real life, everyday life, ever since I found out that raccoons, maybe you already knew this, but I didn't know this until this year, raccoons are a form of the bear. I mean, this was like a huge light bulb to me. I was like, I don't know, I didn't bother to learn about that in school, I guess. So I've wondered if this childhood memory that I was telling you about with the trash and the raccoons and stuff, it kind of takes on a different meaning, a much more profound meaning, and a deeper meaning, especially of interaction between the animal spirit in the context of modern culture. Because, this story happened in the early 80s, late 70s. I didn't grow up in a household that was very animistic or the way I am now. I didn't grow up that way. And so it's interesting that something that may have happened earlier in your life where you can take kind of what seems like a very superficial story or a superficial kind of fun, memory, and realize that there was something really much deeper going on there, or, possibly going on. So I hope that those two things I was talking about kind of come together in the same way that I meant them to, which was the raccoon story and then the mountain lion incident. Because they didn't happen on purpose. I didn't schedule them to do that for this. The originally scheduled podcast for this episode was to tell you about this story about the raccoon and my grandfather. And what ended up happening was I read that email in between writing this podcast and recording today. So I consider that a very synchronistic, that was meant to happen. So I hope that this was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, let me know. I am offering the class, Getting to Know Your Animal Spirit Family, and I will leave some information on how to sign up for that. And until next time, blessings.